Realize.
All right, welcome back, everyone. About a little after 2:45. We are now having a conversation with legislative council on a reports repeal bill, which I believe for most, if not all members, with the exception of maybe, wow, this might be a new conversation. Council.
Good afternoon. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. I'm going to walk you through and introduce you to the biennial reports repeal process, which is the most exciting process outside of charters. Charters are still number one. Reports repeal is a very close second. And to provide you with some background on why the reports repeal happens at base, the General Assembly in 2 VSA Section 20 adopted general rules governing the duration and distribution of agency reports. And in subsection D, stated that it is the intent of the General Assembly that except for interstate compacts, the requirement to report to the General Assembly shall no longer be required after 5 years or after 5 years from the last date that the statutory or session law section containing the report was amended, whichever date is later. And then went on to say, Leg Council, please keep track of this for us. So that's what we do. We have a database of all of the reports that are due to the General Assembly, including a publicly facing database that has everything from 2009 to present that has been submitted to the General Assembly. And we bring to the government operations committees the lists of the reports that are supposed to have expired. There is an interesting legal issue here, which is that this expression of intent says that after 5 years, the reporting requirement is supposed to magically disappear. But as we all know, you can't bind future assemblies, right? And law doesn't repeal itself. So you all actually have to take the step of repealing a report that is, and I'll put this in quotes, due to expire. Because although Leg Council is tracking it and you have this expression of intent, nothing is going to happen to these reports unless they are repealed or extended or made permanent. So what we do for the Government Operations Committee every year is prepare a memorandum that will go out to all of the other committees in the name of your committee. That informs all the other committees of this process, walks them through the underlying law, and then gives them some guidance on how to approach this process. Essentially, ask yourselves the question, have you used and will you need to use these reports in legislative decisions? And then check a box, either that the report under consideration is no longer useful and should be repealed, or the report is useful, but maybe shouldn't be permanently required. Ask us again in another 5 years. Or this report is so fundamental and important to the work that we do as a committee that it should not withstand the report's repeal, and don't ever ask us again. Those are the three options. Then at the end, the letter demands a response by a date certain, which you all can choose. And if the other committees don't respond with their surveys by that date, you prepare the bill to just repeal all of the reports that are due to that committee. Surveys go out. Well, they're going to have the opportunity to vote on it on the floor, so they could always change it, but you have momentary ephemeral power.
That could get easy.
So what I do is prepare survey sheets for each individual committee. It takes a lot of time. But it lists out each of the reports that's due to expire. It includes links to the underlying law so that the committees can go see who made the decision, why the decision was made, and what the underlying matter of the report is. It gives them the option to check one of three boxes to repeal, extend, or permanently retain. That is basically it. When it comes time to draft the actual bill, things get slightly more complicated because what happens when a report is due to 5 committees and one committee says repeal it, 3 committees say we want 5 more years, and another committee says it's so important we need it permanently. Well, you have to draft to meet each one of those committees' desires. So you strike the committee that wanted to repeal it so that they no longer receive a copy. For the 3 committees that want 5 more years, you give them those 5 years. And for the committee that wants to permanently retain, you say, you're going to have an opportunity 5 years from now to make your final decision if that's the case. And you balance all that out in the bill. I didn't know if you wanted to dive into your committee's reports just yet, but I did send it so it could be posted on the page. You can start taking a look at the reports that are due. I would encourage you to check out the underlying law. Maybe at some point look at the reports database, which I can show you how to access right now. And maybe we can even take a look for some of these reports and see if they have even been submitted. So some I'll flag immediately well is that many of these reports, especially once they're 10 years old, let's say, are no longer being submitted. So there's a statutory requirement for them that's just not being met. And typically they're not being asked for by the legislative committees either. So perhaps that's a basis for saying that the report is no longer needed if it hasn't been submitted in a decade and no one has missed it.
Right.
How did you get to that page, Tucker, from the?
If you go to the main page, click on reports and research. And then in the lower left-hand corner, find legislative reports. It takes you right to the page.
You.
And then you can refine the results. So there were a few in there that dealt with public records.
Research. Reports. There they are.
So one example is that the court administrator is supposed to submit an annual report on the public records requests and records management practices of the judiciary. And to my knowledge, I don't know that it's ever been submitted. It's like,
When was the requirement for the report put in?
quite a while ago.
So what's the first one on the list?
That's the one he's talking about.
You're gonna try to find one.
Rep Morgan.
I'd just like to thank Tucker for expanding my vocabulary. I always heard of ephemera as being old transient letters, but ephemeral as in a transient document.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
ephemeral power.
Also in Hurry.
A font of knowledge.
That's the femoral.
Yes. Yeah, that's different.
It's a conduit.
Are there any questions about the process? I will note that no reports repeal bill has moved out of committee in 3 or 4 biennia. So the lists that you'll be taking a look at are quite long. So for example, I haven't finished doing the work on the current reports repeal. So this is not a fully updated list, but I am very quickly scrolling. And there are already 136 reports that are subject to review this biennium, but 75 to 80% of them are from the past 7 years where there hasn't been a reports repeal. I would assume that by the time I'm done updating all the committees, you'll be looking at a list of 160 to 180 reports.
Thanks.
Sounds dense.
This should come the opposite.
So considerations for the committee moving forward from this point. You have your sheet to start doing your own housekeeping on this. You have a copy of the blank letter that we can use, that you can use to reach out to the other committees.
The memo.
Immediate considerations. When do you want to take this up and how long are you going to give the other committees to actually respond to the surveys? Once you know that, when do you want to send out the surveys? Before the end of the session, or do you want to have them prepared for the beginning of next session? Then how would you like to organize coordinating with the other committees? The way that this has gone down in the past is that the legislative council attorney would coordinate with the committee assistants, and we would try to corral as many cats as possible. And sometimes it would get a little difficult, but with a coordinating within the off session. So one suggestion that I would have is perhaps the committee members would be willing to take responsibility for some of your counterparts in the House and the Senate and be the ones coordinating with them to make sure that the surveys get in by the deadline.
Okay, that's valid.
Certainly not something you have to do, but that is how the Appropriations Committee, for example, that handles the big bill and coordinating with the committees.
Yeah.
I'll coordinate that.
Actually, this, yeah, 13. Already made 13. Tucker, the other committees' reports that they're responsible for, that memo, that would be in addition to the memo that we're sending them. You have compiled which each committee is responsible for. I assume that was your color coding up there, but maybe not.
So the color coding I am really trying to get rid of, but I had a law clerk and an intern at one point who built conditions into the spreadsheets that I use. And they highlight based on how overdue the repeal is.
Okay.
So
Right.
yeah, the red stuff hasn't been reviewed since 2017. So
Okay.
I don't like the color coding system and it no longer responds to new input. So some of this red stuff should be like, I don't know, mordant black or something like that. But yes, each committee, and I can just click on some of the ones from last session to try to give you an idea of what we're dealing with
So
here.
we'll send out a new memo with a new due date for the survey to be completed. But that has to give time, that due date has to give time for each committee to go through all of those reports and make a decision on them. So I definitely don't think there's time in this session to require them to report back to us.
Something to be sensitive of moving forward as well is that one of the reasons this can sometimes stall and die is that most of the reports go to money committees and the due dates for responses always seem to align with when the money committees are the most busy. And once we start delaying in order to get responses, I mean, so what I put up right now is the House Appropriations, and there were 44 individual reports the last time this came up. That, is almost half of all the reports that are being considered have to be reviewed by just that one committee. So picking a deadline where there's an abundance of time for the money committees to address this when they have a window of opportunity is a great way to structure this. And also, I'm so happy that you're talking about this now, because typically this comes up like mid-January, second year of the biennium.
Got a little bit more, yes, and snarl and hango.
So what do we actually do? I see the citation, I see that it expired in 2020. Then the next step is to find the bill on the other chart. And then
ultimately what the committee should be doing is actually looking for the reports. So the links there that I provided are so that the committees can take a look at where the requirement exists in law, in an act somewhere, but was never codified and is just sitting in a budget from 2012, asking an agency to file a report. But look for the report, determine whether it has been useful at all for the committee's work. Is it a report that the committee used for purposes of a bill or a proposal? Is it a check back where you have an opportunity to hold an agency accountable, right? Are they reporting something as in they're making recommendations? Or are they reporting something like this is how we used the problem gambling fund this last year? Here's where we spent the money. And if it's not useful, repeal it. If it is useful, maybe add it to the permanent list.
So to build on Rep. Pincinel's question, I mistakenly assumed that these citations were live links. They are not, correct?
They should be.
Unless
I
I have
will-
to open Copilot, which it's telling me to do, which I don't have. Can others open the
No.
report?
I will send a fresh PDF.
Okay. Glad my assumption was,
All the links do work. I'll click, maybe it'll, no, because it'll only show you the window that I have. But I just clicked on that. Show you that it went right to the page where the report is required.
And that's what I was thinking, to keep going back and forth
Yes.
from that. to that.
yeah, but
Yes.
we won't have to with our own, because we'll just be able to click on it. And that's the only, those are the only ones that we'll have to comment on to repeal, extend, or retain. And I don't know if this is an appropriate suggestion, but members could take responsibility for certain reports and report to the committee, have a committee discussion and say, these 3 reports that I have responsibility for researching either have never been issued or they've been issued, but I've been told that they're not being used or they're really, really important. And we could report back and have a committee discussion on our own. It's up to the other committees what they do with theirs. But Tucker, do you have suggestions for appropriate due dates?
Typically, the committees were given 3 weeks from the time that the letters and surveys were sent out. And that is just because, again, typically this is taken up in January, second year of the biennium. You have a lot of looming deadlines and a lot of business happening. And the return of the surveys is the start of the drafting process, right? Because then I have to make a master sheet showing where each of the committees wants a report to go, which bucket it falls into, and then draft after that. So if you're planning on giving them until next session, you could have the deadline be the first week of the session.
There are a handful of committees that have a pretty low workload right now because we're kind of waiting for budget stuff and education stuff. So maybe if we let them know sooner rather than later, it's work that they could not have to complete in the next couple of weeks, but at least they get a good head start on.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
that was actually why the speaker suggested or recommended, requested that we take
Yeah.
this up now was to get something in front of the committees while we're going longer than usual, but knowing that there is capacity.
Sure.
Yep, so what I was thinking is, it looks like we might have a little bit of time tomorrow after S-131, maybe like we could take the evening to think about how we want to start doing an order of operations with this and maybe start trying to hone that in for half hour, 45 minutes tomorrow. so we can get a sense of how we want to direct this to the other committees and on what kind of timeline. So, I mean, because this is like all new information for like all of us on how to like actually like be the architects of this process. And we are doing it a little bit of a different timeline for that than in previous periods, which frankly makes sense. Right, there you go.
So I guess going back to a question I asked earlier of you, Tucker, do you have these spreadsheets made up for all of the committees currently?
Yes, not all of them are updated for 2027, 2028, which is the next expiration period that
So there'll be more by the time we get that.
So how much extra work is that gonna be for
Yeah, I was
you
gonna
if we want to send this out this week?
it takes about 30 to 60 minutes per committee to pull all of the information from the database and update the spreadsheets. So you're looking at probably a day of work to update all the remaining committees that I have left to do.
Do we have to let everybody know all at once, or can we just start with the committees that we know are the least busy right now?
I think it depends on what if you have some complete already that we can
Oh, yeah.
send to.
Or identify the committees that have more capacity and then prioritize those lists
Yeah,
is what I'm
Good
thinking,
point.
actually. And I think that would be something I would have to talk to some chairs about between now and, you know, this is sort of like what I was alluding to, that kind of marinating on what Tucker's laid out for us within the scope of work of this project, which is March. And take the evening and some of the morning to talk to folks in the other committees, chairs in the speaker's office and such, and see how they want us to focus this, what their suggestions are on focus. So. Rep Hisco.
Tucker must have some idea of who we can eliminate right off the bat without doing a whole lot.
I don't believe that's counts as charges.
I know, I'm just.
I'm a big feminist too.
One of the things that we note in the letter, in the email that gets sent out, is that the committees of jurisdiction can invite their legislative council attorneys in to provide feedback on the report, its context, and whether it's ever been submitted. For
Yes.
example, so Tim and I went to Senate GovOps last biennium and walked that committee through each one of the reports that are due to Senate GovOps, and then flagged for them, for example, this report has been required for 25 years and has never been submitted. And if no one has objected to its absence, perhaps it's time to make that absence permanent.
Yeah. So. All right, so. Let's take a little time, take a look at the memo, think about this, and that'll provide me some time to get a little bit more refined direction on this with the other chairs, and we'll chat more on this around 11:15, 11:30 tomorrow after the testimony on S-131. Anybody have any other questions, comment, or input on this particular project?
I'm just confused on the page for the legislative reports. So you only have you have the report name submitted by and the posted date. How do you find out where the activity is on that by looking at this?
So this page only contains those reports that have been submitted.
Oh, okay.
Which is why your job is so fun.
So,
Hold on, Autumn?
Also on our committee page where it's like bills, other documents, there's one for reports and resources. Those are all the reports and reports that I've gotten emailed to me directly for our committee. So that is also.
for this session.
Yeah, for this session, yes, the ones that were delivered, yes.
At one time, there were filing cabinets in all of the committee rooms, and they were full of all of the reports ever sent to the committee so that the committee could go back in time to 1972 and pull a report.
Sounds like a fun archival project. Yes, Rep. Hassan.
Could we do like the first one as a team, just so we go through the steps? Is there anybody have an objection of doing that? Like, just so we know what we're all looking for?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I assumed there was this. We all have to like educate ourselves.
Yeah, so if we're gonna
Process.
break off into teams, then we'll at least know what we're doing.
Okay, anything else? All right, great. That gives us a couple of things to think about going into tomorrow. And I think that's all I have formally for the table. There's, yes.
We're supposed to discuss our bills that we.
Oh, yeah.
That we reported on and followed. I don't think we need Tucker for that, right?
Probably not.
All right.
And yeah, so tracking bills that are moving around the building right now.
Autumn has that spreadsheet sent to us on Thursday. Our email. You could, if
Please.
you'd like. Thank you, Autumn. So these are pretty much the big bills. They're not including the charters. So everybody kind of knows where your charters are now. And you're following any issues or changes that the Senate might be making. But we kind of wanted an update as to where everybody's big bills are headed. So, talked about this a little bit last week. Michael, Morgan, do you, know, like when the Senate's thinking about voting out H1? I'm using you as an example because it's first on the screen.
Second reading tomorrow in the Senate. According to our status, other than that, I don't personally. have-
Okay,
Yeah, that's the update. Yeah,
okay,
it's on the floor tomorrow.
all right, so that's.
So I assume it'll be to us by early mid next week.
And are you aware, Michael, of any changes that they've made? And if not, if you could help us to understand like where they came from?
You mean like go to that committee and ask them?
Yeah, if you can read the bill.
Yeah,
when
I'll.
it comes out of
I'll
the
talk to-
Senate.
I'll be happy to talk to Senator
And-
Collmore and get a read.
And, so in case we have questions in committee, because things start coming really fast.
Just to me, just say, go talk to Senator Collmore and get it done. That's all I gotta say.
But for other people who were gonna ask the same thing, I think it's good to remember that at the end of the session, bills come really fast with Senate amendments, and we don't necessarily have time to vet them 100%, like where it came from, why they made that decision. It might be good to know ahead of time and be able to fill us in on what pretty much happened there. And there's another one that's a possible vote. Oh, that's H 321. So Rep. Boyden, that's yours. I know you're following that because I heard you say you're going there to look at it. So
Yeah,
the
they got it.
committee's gonna take a vote on it possibly.
Possibly, they're hearing more testimony tomorrow morning and then having a discussion after. But overall, they're looking at technically 3, but technically 4 amendments to the bill. It's just like to the effective dates.
Okay, and you've been following it enough that you're familiar with what they've proposed and why.
Yeah, I was in the room the other day when they did their first walkthrough of the amendments, which largely came from a recommendation of the lieutenant governor as well. Yeah, their discussion is interesting.
Yeah, and they've got a huge slug of testimonies scheduled for tomorrow, so,
And it sounds like the other three are still in committee having testimony taken.
397, I believe is they're getting ready to get that out of there. I believe it is. They are doing some testimony on it today. I believe Senator Calhoun said he wanted to get that out of his goal is to get that out this week.
Okay, that's good to know.
And then, not open meeting.
Elections is just chilling.
Correct. And also OPR is in finals.
Yeah, that's what it says.
It's, you want me to?
If you know what you think might happen to it, like, is it gonna come out this week or next week or?
I think they're planning to take it up next week after the ed bills.
Okay.
Makes
Makes sense.
And then, yeah, there's a few changes that mostly seem clarifying.
Okay. So you've been following it to know what's in it and what's out. Thank you. Right. It's good. I feel like we passed a lot more bills than this, but I think they were all charters. The rest of them were charters.
Those were the heavies.
Yeah.
Like,
Some have been signed into law.
Yep, we have
That's
that.
right.
And those were things that were less dense.
No one cares about first.
That's
I feel like it's true.
charters kind of had that, so easy ones. Okay, so everyone's aware of where their bills are floating around.
Mhm.
I really appreciate the interactive spreadsheet
And so.
Mhm.
and barring any